Okay, we're going. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Wood, District 6 representative for the Town Council. This is a charter info session. Let me explain a little bit about how we got here for tonight, just so everybody knows what we might do tonight, and then we'll get right into it. So this meeting is posted as a rules and procedures meeting just to be open about it. There's no agenda for rules and procedures other than just a discussion. There's no action by rules and procedures. There's no action for the council on this item. As hopefully everyone is aware right now, the town charter is up on the ballot for a vote on April 27th. So I wanted to put together a session like we did in May of 2017, which is to present what the changes are. Back then, they were proposed, and they weren't finalized. Now they're finalized. They're for vote on April 27th, just in a few weeks. So I wanted to make sure that folks had a chance to, A, one, be aware of the changes, and B, and two, have a chance to ask questions about the changes. Aisha said she might join us later. She was on rules and procedures at the time we discussed it. Tim Fitzgibbon's sitting in the room. For the Charter Review Commission, in the room we have Dennis Gallagher, who was chairman at the time, Carlton Hunt, I don't know if you were chairman at a period, Eric Lynch is in the back there, and Aisha was on that committee as well. So we got at least four of the people that went through the process. So about tonight. Tonight is supposed to be more informal than a regular meeting or someone standing here telling you about stuff that you probably already know. So I've put together a small slide deck. It'll probably take 10 or 15 minutes to run through. I'd like to get through that, and then I'd like to introduce the Charter Review Commission folks to see if they want to add anything that I might have missed in the presentation that they might have done through the process. And then I'd like to generally open it up to questions. Ask anything you want. We're not constrained by time, although I'd like to be done in less than 2 hours, but I'll stay here all night if you have questions. The other thing is that, everybody should get a chance for a question. So unlike me, when I get a microphone, I might take 13 minutes, try to keep it brief to the point. As a friend of mine says, stand up, say what you want to say, and sit down. And we'll try to get any question that you might have answered. We've got a good representation of people that worked on the process, so that should work. Is that everybody okay with that? All right, fantastic. All right, so I took a training course at work a couple weeks ago, and they highlighted an author named Bruce Tuckman. He has this performance model he introduced in 1965. There are 4 phases for a team. There's a forming session, a forming time, a storming time, a norming time, and a performing time. Personally, I got on the council to help bring us through the first 3 aspects of this, and then I think I want to be done. But we had a forming time in 2011, really 2009, and then 10 we voted on the new charter. 11 we took our first seats. Things got started. Then we entered a time of storming. I'm hoping that most of that is behind us and that we can, continue advancing forward. Norming is making sure everybody on the team understands what their role and responsibilities are, and that we define how the team works and develop the rules that we all work by. And then performing is really a high energy team who knows how to produce, right? And so you might see this in production factories or something like that. I'm in software. We see that in software. So I thought it was interesting when I heard about this model, and it kind of aligned with what we've been going through for the town of Bridgewater. So the Charter Review Committee had a set of procedures, which is in the final report, and it includes a double voting policy. So the mission of the statement in the final report says, the committee established the following policies at the first meeting. It encouraged public input, it provided public notification, and had a double voting policy to ensure items considered and recommended for change early in the review were still recommended at the end of the process, and they met frequently. So I thought that was a great policy to establish the cadence of the meetings, how it would work, and get a lot of public input. I wanted to include that here. Just a short review of how we got from that point to this point. The Charter Review Committee was formed in 2014. I was surprised to see that they had met 27 times. They held interviews. There's a lot of notes in the minutes. They used the double voting process to recommend changes in April of 2015. And then their work was reported to the council, handed over to the council, and the council handed it to the Rules and Procedures Committee. And the committee met at least 10 times. I have no idea how many times we actually met. It was a lot. We walked through basically every single line of the charter and reviewed every single thing that was recommended, and had time to talk about it. And again, those were all public meetings. The public was invited to come to the council meeting. Carlton from the CRC participated several times, helping us edit for grammar, spelling, other things, aligning the recommendations to what was in the charter. The charter, I think, is around 35 pages. Every single page has a lot of changes on it. Some are minor. Some are simply capitalize the T. Some are interesting. Take the word selectman out of the document because we're not a selectman here. After Rules and Procedures was done, we recommended the changes back to the full council. Of course, the Rules and Procedures is a committee. We only recommend, we don't establish what it's going to be. So it went back to the full council. The full council evaluated all of our recommendations and then amended the charter. So not amending the charter, but amending the document so it could be sent up to the state. And that was November of 17, still a couple years away. Hi, Aisha. And then the state and Senate committees worked for almost a year. I'm not sure what took them so long. It's government, things happen. And then the governor signed the final product on January 9, 2019. And so a couple actions of the council and the town clerk, and we have the charter in front of the town to vote. So that was the process. I think, it took around 5 years. Seems like a very long time. There were so many meetings, so much detail to go through. I'm happy that we're getting near the end here. So in the process, a lot of people forget about the roles and responsibilities of the different pieces of this town manager, town council form of government. The town manager is responsible for executing the budget goals and priorities set by the council. So the council can set anything through a legislative action, through a measure, either a resolution, ordinance. And the town council is responsible for setting the budget, the goals, and priorities of the town by the legislative process. So some cases, those are like our old bylaws where it's within the framework that affect, don't throw a banana peel in a crosswalk type of thing. But in a lot of cases, it has to do with how to manage the town manager. So we don't direct the departments, but we direct the town manager. And we do so through legislative action, setting orders and ordinances, goals, priorities, and anything like that. And the town clerk holds an extremely critical process in this whole government setting. The town clerk is the keeper of vital records and executes all elections related activities. So I'll get to the details in a few minutes. There were a couple items we did not include in the recommendations and didn't make it into the final product. The first one, I'm surprised I missed. I'm not sure what happened to it. There were years of discussions. As a district councilor, I can tell you it takes a long time to get 100 signatures. If you make it to 75, you're probably committed to making it for another 25. It took me in the 3 elections probably, and to get 10 signatures probably took an hour. You can't just stand at the transfer station like the at-large councilors and collect signatures. You can. It's hard. And then there was a recommendation to combine districts 4 and 5 into a single district. 4 has the college, 5 has the prison. And although they count in the population, they don't usually actively participate in the government or town activities directly. They do for other things, but not directly. There are prisoners that vote. There are college students that take up residence at the college and maybe vote. But the population counts. So when you're splitting up the town into 7 districts, those districts have some very active residents and passive residents also. So we can talk about that later if you have questions about it. But I thought, and I don't know if others thought, it was a rather complex process to think about that. So we didn't take up that recommendation. Okay, so here's an update, and I know I may have missed stuff. I spent hours reconciling the old with the new and trying to find examples for tonight, and I know there's probably a few things that I missed, so others can remind me as we go further on. Every single page of the charter has changes. In some cases, it's the number 1 changed into the word 1. In some cases, it's capitalization. Other times, there's substantial changes that we go through. One of the recommendations, which I liked, was that we keep our current form of government, which is town manager, town council. There's always the concept that you could return back to selectman town meeting or go to a representative town meeting or some other form that includes maybe a mayor. So the recommendation was to stay as we are. Another recommendation, which we'll get to, is the elimination of term limits for councilors. Again, all these items where you see CRC is a recommendation by the Charter Review Committee. Stipends for the town councilors, which currently is a hot topic. We added a recall provision for those that know the history of Bridgewater. Back in, I think it was 92, there was a special act at the State House to include a provision for recall. There was a lot of discussion on that. It went to court a couple times. So the provision has been added into the charter itself as a new section in the charter, so there's no question about what the procedure is or how to access that. Improving the FinCom definition. We find that the Financial Committee has a lot of problems meeting because they can't meet quorum. The structure of the charter is described in a few minutes. And then we collectively decided to reduce the time it takes a measure to become effective down to 30 days, down from 30 days to 72 hours. Think about it. Resolution is the opinion of the council. If the council votes and has an opinion, why should it take 30 days to say that that's the opinion of the council? And there's other situations like that. And then the Charter Review Committee recommended that the town clerk be appointed by the town council. So let's go into a little bit of details, and then this will take another few minutes, and then we'll open it up to discussion. By the way, Aisha, I mentioned already that it was a posted meeting, that we don't have any activity. You and I make a quorum now of the Rules and Procedures Committee, but we do not have any active activity on this or any other item tonight. Thank you. That is correct, she said, for those at home. So the elimination of term limits for the council. A friend said the most effective term limit is one that is implemented by an informed voter at the ballot box. I thought that was really true, right? You want to have a term limit? Vote them out of office. Right now there's a term limit in the charter that's there, and the CRC recommended removal. The Rules and Procedures continue with the recommendation. The council continued with that recommendation. And now it's up to the voters to decide if they're going to accept that or not. So term limits remove the voice of the voter. So if the voter can't vote on someone because there's an artificial term limit, they've lost their voice to vote. There's a section now for small stipend for town council members. You can read the new section. The most important thing is there's two critical things: no benefits, no pension. It's just simply a stipend, and it won't take effect until after April 27th, 2022. There's a 3-year moratorium on it. That's part of the document also. We had, in our May of 2 years ago discussion and others, I had pulled numbers from surrounding towns. There was an article in the Boston Globe. Braintree pays their, I believe it's council, at least $5,000. Weymouth, $7,500, Brockton, $10,000. Raynham is $61.99 per selectman. There's other numbers. Dennis and I went to an MMA conference last year, and we met many towns that had turned to this form of government. Some of the larger cities are paying 20 to 30,000. I know Barnstable pays 12. Some of the towns more toward the Berkshires pay 10. So in my opinion, anyway, 3,000 is pretty small. As I said, we added recall provisions. So Section 3.3 is the new section, and there's a lot of detail in that section, so I won't go into all the detail. You can read about it yourself. Finance Committee. The old one had 9 members, 3 for the town manager, 3 for the town council, 3 for the clerk. I know that when we try to find folks to sit on the committee, it's difficult. I'm not sure if it's a time commitment. We're into budget season. We're going to meet probably like every Monday for the next couple months. I don't know if it's personal commitment. It's been a problem. So I'm happy the CRC came up with the fact that we could set it by ordinance. So it'd be more like the planning board. The state gives you the ability to set your planning board members from 5 to 9 of different term limits, and it's all set locally. So I think this will benefit the town by being able to probably make the group smaller, more effective. And then it's the shorter waiting periods, as I mentioned, dropping it from 30 days to 72 hours. And this is just a copy of the text from the 2 documents. The appointed town clerk. I discovered that Bridgewater ranks number 72nd of the 351 cities and towns. So we're no longer a small college town. We're much bigger than that. We're in the top third. And then I asked the Secretary of the Commonwealth for numbers. They sent me back spreadsheets. So about 75 of those cities and towns larger than us have already moved to appointed clerk. But the CRC had a final recommendation in their final report. It was number 7 of the major change recommendations. In it, they suggested the text you see below. Change from an elected town clerk to a town clerk appointed by the town council for a 5-year term with protections that assure the independence of the office from political or other influence. So the charter update actually puts that in as a section. And we switched it from 5 years to 3 years. 3 years seems to match the typical appointment calendar of most of the committees and other areas. So 3 seemed to make sense, but otherwise we left the rest intact. You might remember that it said to protect from political and other influences. So this is not an ordinance. This is my concept of how we might do that. It's nothing before the council yet. It doesn't make sense to put it before the council if the charter until the charter passes. But this is like section 4.8 of the charter today, to remove the town manager. So today, to remove the town manager, the council in a majority has to adopt a preliminary resolution of removal. That states the case of why you would want to remove the town manager. There's a hearing process that's defined to ensure fairness. So the hearing can be open or closed depending on the option of the person doing that. And then it takes a 2/3 vote of the full council to remove the town manager. So I've heard from several people, well, maybe to protect the office, we may need to have a provision like that. And so there's homework for the council to do, and that's to come up with a fair and reasonable way to protect the office so that it remains independent. So the town clerk responsibilities have not changed under the charter. The section reads exactly as it is. And in fact, Mass General Law has a definition of what a town clerk is. And so there's a number of different duties. The town council can actually direct tasks of the town clerk's office, and we've got 2 examples, the annual town report and the statement of financial information. The clerk is responsible for election activity, such as running the elections, recording appointments, voter registration, keeper of vital records, birth, death, marriage, keeper of the town minutes, like any minutes like this. So when we post, town clerk's office gets a copy of the agenda, they stamp it with the time. There's a time constraint within open meeting law. You have to do it 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and there's some other subjects. So you need to make sure that the notice is fair and open to the public. Collects annual census, dog licenses. I work closely with Marilee on the dog licenses. We've got it switched over so it actually goes with the census. We changed the timetable of when the licenses were due. So there's no reason that anyone now can say, I didn't get a copy of my dog license renewal form because it came with your census, and everybody got a census. So I thought that was a pretty good shift, and we work closely together on that. And general town information, a lot of people come into the town clerk's office for information like street listing and who the town councilor is and other information about the town. So none of that changes. And then contrary to removal, I thought we should also have provisions into how we would select and appoint a town clerk, and add that to the administrative code. So first of all, everyone's interested in having a Bridgewater resident. I think that's first and foremost an important aspect. Town clerk's office is the face of Bridgewater when most people walk into the office. We should define the qualifications for candidates, job description, what they're going to do. Most of the activity office is statutory. It's compliance. It's regulatory. There has to be a certain way that you record activity, that you report it to the state, that you do a number of other things, notary public, things like that. So for a lot of the activities, it's set in stone. And then for some other things, there's like what the council requests, it's not so much. But we want a job description. To be fair to the candidates, we would want to have an interview process defined, right? So it's just not run as an ad hoc interview. Hey, I like you, I don't like you, whatever. You define the skills, you ask about the management experience, you ask about other things that pertain. Maybe you have a question from each 9 or something like that. And then, how are you? And then, and not, all this is subject to change because the council would have to take this up and create a measure around this. But then you would want, something to be fair that says something like 2/3, like any other ordinance, is in effect 2/3 of the vote for the full town council would be used to hire a town clerk. So if you can get 6 out of 9 to commit to a particular candidate, then the candidate must be pretty good. So those additions to the admin code would happen after the vote, and it would be all measured and get input from the public and others about how to really reinforce that protection of the office, because the office does need to be independent. And there's not a lot of crossover between town clerk activities and town council activities. So we want to make sure it remains effective. All right, so that's my piece. Thank you for being so patient. This part is all about information. It's all about interaction. We have a microphone up here. As I said, Aisha and Dennis and Eric and Carlton were on the Charter Review Committee and can answer any questions about what they were thinking when they went through the process and the process itself. Myself, Aisha, and Tim were on the Rules and Procedures Committee when we worked through all the details of the process. And Dennis and Aisha, Tim, and myself, not a quorum, are on the council today. And Fred's here. Okay, we're not meeting as you're here by chance. This is not a meeting of the town council. There is no business to be had. No discussion outside of this. Okay. All right. So it's open to questions. Anybody can ask a question. Sure.
Use the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
So we can hear you.
Yeah, just
Got it. I think it's there. Thanks. In your presentation, specifically that you said that the Charter Review Committee recommended that we not have term limits. That's incorrect. Specifically, we said Section 2.2 modify term limits from 12 consecutive years to 4 consecutive terms. So you're misrepresenting what the committee said. That's my first comment.
All right, awesome. That's why we're here, for information like that.
Want me to run the mic around?
Oh, if you don't mind.
You're talking about term limits, what you just said. 1951, they passed the 22nd Amendment of the United States to limit the presidency. Your comment on limiting the voice of the people, that was like, what, 2/3 of the states have to ratify that? It didn't silence the voice of the people in 1951. Term limits are a good idea.
Yeah, that might be good. Yeah. So Joe just said an idea. So in a regular meeting, we'd ask you to identify yourself. So if you could identify yourself,
I'm Bill Akins,
that'd be good.
District 6, your district.
My district, yep.
Right. And so, as I was saying, if it's good enough for the President of the United States, it's good enough for the town council. 12 years is plenty of time for you to get whatever you need to get done. You don't need to go 16, 20, indefinitely. As for the stipends, the town could use the money. There was had a meeting last week where the Parks and Recreation had they've been asking for years to get $10,000 to keep the passive Parks and Recreation. That's $17,000 less than what the stipends would cost. So the option is stipends or parks.
Well, there's always a third option, but I want to
I'm
give
sure
the
there's
room
other
a lot of
options. I'm
questions.
kind of putting
The ability
it.
to ask questions, right?
Okay, and then the last one is the town clerk. I have to read something that you put on your Facebook page. And this is an anecdote that you said about the town council, about the clerk and about having the clerk being independent. So I'd like to have your opinion on that as soon as I get the phone to work. Okay. You responded to one of the residents. He said, "You may have seen me ask to the town attorney the other night after going through the process where the town council voted to refuse to schedule and recall an election, and then the town clerk took the council to court, and the judge sided with the clerk." I can continue to go on, but that piece right there is the reason why the clerk has to remain as an elected official.
Sure. Now, does anybody mind if I address this particular question? We formulate a question. So in 2012, as I sat in the courtroom, there were actually 2 cases against the council. I was on the council at the time. So there was a group of individuals that had brought suit against the council because the council, I should back up. The reason I always ask the attorney, usually in humor, what would happen if the council failed to schedule the election? And it's usually, in humor. So that year, the council actually failed to schedule the election. We as a council, by majority vote, decided not to schedule the election, even though the town clerk had said that the election had to be scheduled. So all the signatures had been collected for the recalls. We had gone through an investigative process. We had gone through a couple other things, and the council failed to schedule the election. Now, it's the responsibility of the town clerk to hold an election that's legally valid. That election was legally valid, and that was ratified by the fact that the judge found in favor of the town clerk, as well as the citizens that brought the petition for. So whether we agree with the recall or not, the town clerk had a mandatory job to do and was forced to do that job, and would not have been different had it been elected or appointed at that time. So that's why I asked that question. What would happen if we failed to bring an election? And the answer is, you can't. You have to have the election. The Secretary of the Commonwealth would step in and say, you're going to have an election. The signatures are there, the procedure was followed, and it's going to be held.
That's if the Secretary of the Commonwealth knows what's going on. I'm sure they're not paying attention all the time to what happens in Bridgewater.
Well, let me tell you.
The town clerk's job is to bring it to their attention. And that's what they did, according to your own post.
Right, they did.
So they should not be answering to the town council. That's a conflict of interest. That alone makes the charter changes dangerous because it takes away checks and balances.
Okay, so Eric, you have a...
Bill, if I could just say,
Oh, take the microphone if you could.
sorry. Eric Lynch from Fieldcrest Drive. I served on the committee, and I think this was actually a subject that we bounced around quite a bit. And I think one key thing to remember here is the town clerk's position is mandated by law to run and call for elections when they're valid. Mandated, whether it's appointed or an elected position, it's mandated. Okay? So whether the person or the individual holding that position is elected or appointed, that position is statutory required by Massachusetts general law if a valid election is called for to hold the election. There's no difference between an elected or an appointed in that manner. Having said that, it's up to the town to decide what they want to do at the end of the day.
Well, can I just want to chime in as a counselor. I don't really have a question, but I just want to give my little points of what I think should transpire on election day. And I agree, and I with a lot of what Councilor Wood is proposing, but I disagree with a few things that are probably very, very important. And I appreciate him putting this together so the public can come out and ask questions before a very important vote that the town takes on changes to the charter. I think this is important to do. We don't do this quite often. And I'm glad we have about 20, 25 people here, and who knows who else is watching. But when we started with the charter review back in April of 2014, one of the first things that we struggled pretty much in the beginning as to whether or not to make the town clerk appointed or keep it elected. We had a lot of discussions about that, and we also met with the previous town clerk, and he was very adamant that he wants to keep it elected, and he would fight all the way if a recommendation came forward any differently. Some of the other changes that you're going to be voting on in the charter too are kind of important as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them and then get back to the town clerk, because I think that's the real hot button issue. As far as the ordinance changes that Councilor Wood presented, those are not something that will fall into place if you vote for the charter changes on April 27th. These will be discussions afterwards, and they don't automatically fall into place. So the issue of having a town clerk as a resident may not happen. The council could change their mind. I doubt they will, but I'm just saying that's not guaranteed if it goes to a point. It'll probably be proposed that it stay a residency requirement. That's not guaranteed. The Finance Committee that has struggled to have a quorum based on 9 members, the charter change you vote on does not give it a number. The number of the Finance Committee will be discussed in an ordinance if the charter changes pass. They could stay at 9. It might be reduced to 7 or 5. I think the number 5 has been tossed around a lot. And that may be what comes out in the ordinance if the charter changes pass. So those things aren't clear yet. We could still end up with 9 people and then still have a problem with a quorum. But I don't think that'll happen. As far as the stipend goes, I mean, I do think a person's work is worth an hourly rate, in my opinion. But whether we get a stipend or not doesn't really matter too much to me. But I think it does say something if you do give a stipend to town officials. But it doesn't, whether that passes or not. It's a small issue. When selectmen were in place, we were $3,200, and then it got reduced to $1,000, and then got reduced to 0. And it's been there ever since, even with the council coming in favor. So it's not a big deal to me, and I don't know, I'm sure it's a big deal to a lot of people. But one of the issues that's very, very concerning to me is that when this came back from the Rules and Procedures Committee in final form, we talked about potentially breaking it out into a few questions. So there wouldn't be just one. There would be the town clerk issue, which seems to be driving this whole thing, would be a separate question, because there are a lot of good changes in the charter. There are. We also potentially, the stipend would be a separate question. When it left us to go to the state and my colleagues are here, can correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that when it came back, we could then break it out into questions and continue that discussion. But when it came back as one question. We were told, no, we have to put it's all or nothing. And I think that's unfortunate because of what I'm hearing out there in public is no on the appointed town clerk and no on the stipend. But I was the one in the beginning of the discussion where I was like, let's keep it elected. Let's keep it elected. But by the end, through some of the research that we were doing and talks that we had, I kind of agreed, okay, maybe it should be appointed. But I will tell you this, as a counselor, when I got elected in April of 2015, I saw how this form of government really works. And I said to myself, we need to keep the town clerk elected. We need a face of this community. We need someone that can be totally independent and be accountable to the voters, not to 9 members of a council, and not to one town manager. So I am hesitant to say that that's how I feel about that, and I think it's unfortunate that this didn't come back with the opportunity for us to break it down into questions. The other thing to keep in mind is in January of 2020, we got to start this all over again because 6 years will have passed. And according to the charter, every 6 years, we need to form a charter review committee. So in January of 2020, or by July of 2020, we need to have a committee in place to start the next review. So, this is a lot of work that was done by the charter review committee. A ton of work was done by rules and procedures, and the council had some very late nights discussing these changes. It took a long time at the State House to come back. So it took almost 5 years for this whole process, 5 to 6 years for this process from beginning to end to come back. And I'm hoping next time it can move a little quicker. Even if the charter doesn't pass, some of these same things you might see come back again. But those are some of my concerns. I really wish we could have the opportunity to break down these things into a couple of questions. I think that would have been fairer to the voters and fairer to the town. So my position would be is I can't support this, and I'm going to vote no, mainly because I wanted this broken down into questions, and I do think the town clerk should stay elected.
So Dennis, let me ask you a couple questions if I could. So we talked a little bit about the question aspect of it. So the Charter Review Committee never recommended breaking things out into questions. So can you tell me if the Charter Review Committee ever talked about breaking the items out into questions?
I don't think we had a big discussion about that. It might have been thrown around, but no, I would say no.
Okay. So during the year or more that the Rules and Procedures Committee met, did anyone talk about, I'm looking at Aisha because she was in all the meetings with me and Tim was too. Did anyone ask the Rules and Procedures Committee to think about breaking these questions out into different levels of questions?
So that question came up during town council meetings. It didn't come up in the preliminary review of reviewing what we got from the Charter Review Committee, as well as the feedback that we got from the council. So it came kind of as we were getting closer to the end of the process.
So the Charter Review Committee did not recommend breaking the questions out, and it wasn't defined in the Rules and Procedures Committee.
Correct.
So when it came back to the town council, and Dennis, this is back to you. When it came back to the town council, and the town council was adopting the changes that the Charter Review Committee had first made, and then the Rules and Procedures Committee adopted as the changes, and now it was back at the town council level. Why didn't the town council at that point decide to break the items out into questions?
So I can answer that question, and that was because the information we received from our town manager is that we would have the opportunity when it came back. That was always our intent, and that was always something that we were going to discuss once we got it back from the state, but we never had the opportunity because the state came back with its ruling. So that's where we got from A to B. It wasn't something that was steered in one way or the other. Marilee had her hand up. Go ahead.
I threw the track changes up to let people know what we were looking at during the process. There's a lot of changes in here. So the question becomes, okay, even if the council did have the option for the question, who decides what is the most important question or questions to break out? if there's 100 minor changes and 10 major changes and other changes that are in there, wouldn't it be fair, and I'll bounce it back to either one of you, wouldn't it be fair then to also add the question, wouldn't you like to return to a selectman open town meeting?
Yeah, I think when we were discussing this, all of those questions were options to be questions. So we talked about themes of, are you comfortable with the Scribner's errors being updated? Yes or no? Yes. Are you comfortable with us ensuring that the Bridgewater flag is at all meetings? Yes or no? Yeah, we could have gone through every single line if we wanted, or we could have found themes. But again, we never got to that level of discussion because we never got that chance from the state. So, from my perspective, we have one question that we'll see in April. It's yes or no. I encourage you to make a decision, yes or no, or skip the question. It's your prerogative. You don't have to vote if you don't want to, but we would love you to see you there. But really, we can't make any changes to that specific thing at that time. So, Marilee, I know you had your hand up before Dennis went, so I don't know if you want to pass it to Mr. Carlton Hunt, or would you like to speak?
That's only a- It's really more important.
I agree.
You can say it's
I think you can say yours in a bit. I think it was pretty well answered. I remember those town council meetings where we were trying to figure out if it could be broken out. And I remember the town manager and even I believe the town attorney saying we think it'll be able to be broken out later. So I wouldn't place it heavily on their shoulders. I don't know that they had a bigger opinion that they'd gotten on that, but those were the discussions as I remember them too.
I haven't gone back to the film, but I did read the minutes of that meeting. And the minutes do not record anything about questions about breaking out
Oh,
into different
there were
questions.
definitely questions. I mean, I remember them clearly. I don't know if maybe on the tape. Anyway.
So that's a good question. I'll show you exactly. 1 second. Need to switch to my. Yeah.
I want to say stuff about the town clerk. So I don't know if you guys just want to keep on talking about these questions, and then I appreciate it, Aisha. But if the guys want to keep talking about the questions, and that's the bigger question, then I guess they're panicked to do that.
It was not our purview to decide as the Charter Review Commission wasn't our purview to recommend how you go forward. And in fact, I believe Bill at a meeting, it's in the minutes, I just don't have them with me, that you said that there were 3 ways that we could go forward with these changes. You never even mentioned it yourself.
That's right. So what you see up on the screen is the end of House 4752, which is the official document that is the charter itself. So it was sent through the House, the Senate, both had committees, and then the governor again signed this. So the question about Section 5 is, I don't think it was in the original. I don't think Section 5 was in the original edits. This is something that through the committee at the State House they've added. So if you remember the original charter, which I have a copy if anyone wants to see it later, the original charter had 2 questions. And it was very clear that there were 2 questions, or the third option was to stay the same. There were 2 questions on the ballot that year. One was, you want to go to a town manager, town council form of government, which eliminated the open meeting and selectmen, or did you want to go to the, now I forget, the selectmen strong town manager form of government, in which the executive branch would have a strong town manager? And both had similar copies of the document, so that it was clear to the readers that they had one choice or the other. In sections that were the same, like talking about the town clerk, they were identical in both sections. So both sections went to the State House. Both sections were up and set up as the vote. So there were options that came back in that case. So in this case, we only sent one copy up to the State House. I think it's reasonable to think that they assume that we had one question to put on the ballot, and so we end up with a question to put on the ballot.
But whose fault is that, Bill? As a citizen who's going to vote, It's showing that you people are not doing your homework. This was going to be a hot button item no matter what we did. You should have had at least 2 questions. I'm all for fixing the ones and no's and t's or whatever. But you're taking away our right to vote an elected town clerk. The council screwed it up. Nobody else. If you thought you were going to send that up that way, if I was in the State House, I'd have wrote it as one question. It should have been asked that we want these as specific questions, not breaking it down. You people, whether you believe the lawyer, the town manager, or your own committees, you broke it up.
So I think after we hear from that side of the room, I'd like to turn it back to Carlton because I have a question about that question. So,
Hi, Julie Scleparis, Red Mill Road, Precinct 1. I just have comments, not necessarily questions. First, I want to thank Mr. Gallagher because I agree with that. It would have been nice if it was split out. However, we should have gotten there. And I also hear what he hears about the stipends and the town clerk position. The concerns that I have is you say we take away the voice if we eliminate the term limits. However, I don't understand why we're not taking away our voice by appointing a clerk and not voting for a clerk. That's one. You also compared stipends for other towns like Weymouth and Braintree who have an elected mayor in addition to a town council. So I've been here for over 30 years when we had the selectmen, when we had the town council. It's difficult to provide a stipend when the selectmen didn't have one and they were voted in, and you're voted in as well, but there's not, you represent everybody, and there's no town meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
I mean, maybe we should have a mayor if we're going to be
one
paid.
comment.
Maybe we should have a mayor. And to be compared to Raynham, when we know they have more money to pay 3 selectmen than we have to pay 9
right.
councilmen, et cetera.
So one clarification though. So I am on the town council, and I work for the good of the town. But I am a district representative, so I work harder for my district than any other district in town. So when it comes to hot topics like plastic bags, I go to Roach Brothers and I meet with the manager to understand the cost basis between the bags. It's not just about the environment. It's about how many kids are going to be hired. When it comes to the Stiles and Hart parkland, which is 72 acres, which is bound by very difficult property to get into, I'm working with owners of adjacent property trying to open up that area. And when it comes to trying to affect other areas of the town for the benefit of Bridgewater, I do that too. And the example I'm going to raise, which is a huge
Bill, I'm
hot
not saying
topic.
you're not working hard
I
for
know.
all of us. I'm just saying
but
that.
hear me out, please. So the question was raised about bringing dollars into the town. So I don't think there's anybody in the room that can question that I stood my ground when it came to revenue from cultivation of marijuana. So Bill was opposed to that idea. But you know what? We're going to bring in $300,000 in new revenue.
Excuse me, I'm not really sure what this has to do with my comments about taking away our voice on the elected town clerk versus
So you elect
term
representatives.
limits.
You elect representatives. You have to trust that those representatives will make the right choice. So you heard from Mr. Lynch, it's a statutory office. You elect me and Dennis, and I would hope that you trust that we're going to find the right person to sit in the seat that runs the statutory office, and that we can put the protective measures into the administrative code, and maybe the next charter review committee will decide on additional provisions, but that will protect that office so it remains independent. All right. I have a question for Mr. Hunt, if I could. Okay. So you had 27 meetings, you interviewed a ton of people, and yet the final report says you recommend that the town council appoint the town clerk. Why is that?
Okay. I believe Dennis explained it quite. I don't want to feel like I'm shouting. I'm sorry. No, it's not that. It's my voice and how it gets nervous. Dennis explained it quite well. At the time, we looked at also, one of the folks that we brought in was the original charter committee, and they provided some pros and cons for the elected town clerk. And they had some things on the appointed. The cons were some potential for appointed authority influence, but can't be reduced by proper checks and balances. That's a con for an appointed. A positive for the appointed was the increased ability to require needed expertise. On the pros, on the elected side, direct accountability to the citizenry, reduced risk of being influenced by executive or administrators. That's the pros. The cons were, and I don't understand this one, amongst the four that are too many elected positions created little to no competition for positions. Too many elected positions create non-competition. That doesn't make sense to me. So in that point of time, and not fully understanding, for me, you asked the question to me personally, not as an individual. To me, I also was at that point for an appointed town clerk because I thought that would be the strongest thing. But I have since learned new information, and that new information leads me to indicate that keeping that as an elected position has much more strength and much better serves the town's interest than having an appointed clerk. Remember that this charter finally has a recall section. We spent a lot of time on that recall in the committee, that recall section. Any elected person can be recalled underneath that. So if you have an underperforming clerk that gets elected, the town can actually go ahead and do a recall. So we have that protection from someone that's not effective in the office.
So, but you would have to rely on the 1992 version of that, not the new one if it fails.
If the charter passes, it would be in play, and it would not be relevant to an appointed position.
Right.
Which the charter, as put forward now, fails totally to provide the level of detail that an appointed position of that level in the town should in fact be under charter.
So
That failure, to me, that failure is a manifest piece of why I won't vote for this. I'm voting no.
can you share with us the reason why you changed your mind?
I just told you that.
You said you learned something new. Can you share?
I'm going to defer.
Can you share what you learned new that isn't part of the statutory piece of the office?
Yes, I'm just going to say I've observed activities that I'm not at liberty to go into.
It don't affect 75% of the larger cities and towns of the Commonwealth.
Don't put words in my mouth.
No, those were my words. Marilee, can you explain what you see as...
How about I just make my statement and then you can ask me questions? Would that be okay? Because I was, like Carlton, who is my husband, in case anyone doesn't know that, I was also in favor of the appointed town clerk before I was in the position. I saw things very differently, as did my predecessor. So I may not have always agreed with Mr. Adams on everything, but I certainly agree with him on this. And some of the things that I wanted to point out, the first thing, has already been said by a few people here tonight, but I'll just repeat it, and that's the people's voice. I'm a strong believer in democracy, our form of government in this country, and I believe we are, the way that we express that is with our votes. So I believe in letting the people vote and letting the people choose, and it's what I would want to see happen. If they make a terrible mistake, there are ways to correct that, as Carlton mentioned with the recall. I will mention that when I was elected on a Saturday, and on Tuesday my salary was cut by a third, by 30%. So the council, retains the capacity to slice that salary to nothing if you don't like who was elected. So you did that, so you can obviously do that if you want to. So I don't see, if somebody gets elected that the council just really doesn't approve of, give them no salary, and they probably won't come to work, and then your problem's just all solved, I guess. Give them a chance to do it, and give the people of the town a chance to elect the right person. And there's all the recompense we have for making a bad ballot choice. We can do it again some other time. I also would note that you put in a few more things that might happen administratively for the council to provide oversight to the position. I'm much more comfortable with 26,000 bosses than with 9. 9 people who think that they might have some duty, obligation, or desire to call up and tell me what to do. I don't really know how to figure that out. I do better with thinking that the people who are voting for me are the ones who come in and ask me to do things, and I can say, no, I can or can't, but I don't have to feel like I have to do exactly what they say to keep my job. I noticed that for the town manager, which is the other position that the town council appoints, there are 4.5 pages that describe how the town manager is going to be managed. Supposedly setting goals and objectives that the public would know, and seeing and doing a performance review and all of that sort of thing. I see nothing like that for the town clerk. And as you've said, many of the things, not all of the things that the town clerk does, but many of them are administrative. Some of them are making decisions, like we decide who are residents of this town when we make affidavits and tell them they can put their children in school because they're residents of Bridgewater or something like that, or filing for various kinds of documents. There are many things that the town clerk's office is responsible for that weren't on that list. And so I just worry that somebody would call me up and say, okay, we're doing a raffle for XYZ Club, and we just want you to give us a raffle permit. So no.
What would your normal duty be there?
What?
What would your normal duty be?
You would have to jump through the hoops to be able to get a raffle permit. But
So
I'm not, I'm not saying that would happen. I'm just saying there are some things like that. Or there may be somebody who doesn't actually live in town but wants to send their child to school in town and has some influence that wants me to do something like that. I like to be free to be able to do what's the right and legal thing to do without worrying that my job is in jeopardy about it.
So if we put the provisions in that give safety by making it a 2/3 or other vote from the council, why would you feel uncomfortable that your job is at jeopardy? Because you would have to have 6 on the council vote to remove the town clerk through a process. And I agree. The Charter Review Committee did not make recommendation on how to protect the job, but did recommend to appoint the town clerk, right?
Right. I think it's fallible from the very beginning. That's what I think part of its Achilles heel is.
Can you give an example of where there would be overlap? Bill mentioned checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example of where your role as town clerk overlaps with the role of the town manager or the role of the town council for any activities that might end up being a check or a balance?
Well, I think I named some of them. I think, Bill, it's a matter, I trust the people too to elect the counselors, and hope that people are taking those positions seriously, and hope that there's some competition in those races, so that we have some debates and people know who they're electing and know what that person stands for. I don't always know who's going to be on the council. I don't know who's always going to be the town clerk. I don't know who's always going to be the town manager. But I think there are times that we have seen happen in government. I'm not saying they've happened to me. I'm saying perhaps I'm being a cynic, but I'm trying to look at what would be the worst case scenario of somebody coming in and closing the door to the office and saying, I am now president of the council. I have 6 friends and we want this thing done.
Has that happened since you've been elected?
I said no. I said no, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. And right now it couldn't happen anyway because you couldn't vote me out just with 6 of you, right? But I'm saying these are things. I mean, we've seen strange things happen in government. We know that sometimes these things can happen. A group of counselors may not always agree. There may not always be 6 of them who get along well enough, but sometime maybe they would. I don't know. I'm just trying to look at what is the worst case scenario. And I'm also trying to say, what is wrong with the old-fashioned way of letting the people have their voice? Why should we take any chance at complicating that? And
So I go back to, why didn't the Charter Review Committee recommend that?
I don't care what the Charter Committee did.
Yeah, we're going to turn over to others. Yep.
More of a discussion and less of a.
Yep.
So I just have 2 things on page 11 under the adoption of I'm Mike Dolan, Cheryl Drive, sorry. Under measures, emergency measures, and charter objection, I see that we go from 30 days to 72 hours of passing a council resolution. I have a concern there that there's no provision that allows the council to potentially make a change in that timeline. So when we banned plastic bags a few years ago, which I was all in favor, that would happen in 3 days versus 30 days, giving very little time for folks to react to it. So I have a concern there. And a concern on 13, compensation. There's no provision in there that says if potentially the town has to have layoffs again, like it did back in the early 2000s, that the council would not get their stipend in place of a laid off employee.
No, but I bet the recall would happen if someone accepted their stipend in that situation.
I completely agree with that thought, Bill, but the fact that the charter doesn't allow for that is a concern. So those were just 2 things that I had, not to change gears from town clerk, because I think that's probably the hotter issue than what
So
I
can
just
we,
brought up.
let's discuss the 72 hours for a second. So it was I think it was a recommendation, right, Carlton, from... Yeah. Well, I can tell you other aspects about the council. So depending on the measure, it gets different treatment, but all measures get 2 readings. So by the rules of the charter, our own rules and procedures, every measure has a first reading. Often it's a practice to go to committee for most of those things. All budget items go to budget finance. All things that look like rules go to rules and procedures. All things that look like economic things go to economic development. There's half a dozen committees, right? So they may sit there for quite a while. And all those committees have public hosted meetings to get feedback on various aspects of them. So there's 3 types of measures that it took us a while in that forming piece to actually understand as a council what those 3 are. One is a resolution, so it's really non-binding. So every year when I introduce the budget resolution, which is an opinion of the council to the town manager, it's a resolution that speaks to what we think the town manager through his finance department should use as a basis for revenue for that year's budget, right? So for resolutions, it's not like the plastic bag thing where it can be said. For an order, if you're going to order the, like BTV had an issue a couple years ago with the snow, so if for some reason the council had to order an action, and I can't remember some of the actions, I think there was I can't remember an exact issue, but in order, when the council finishes it, it's had 2 readings, it may have had a committee item, and then it should take action. It's not a bylaw or an ordinance that affects the general population. It's not something else. For many ordinances, those require public hearings. So the public has ample opportunity to come in and speak for or against the comment, both at the council level and maybe at another level like the planning board. So while I can see the concern about waiting or having too short a period, for like Roach Brothers to put in plastic bags. I'd have to look at the exact language, but I think I could find it. But I think unless there's a date otherwise stipulated, and that's the key. So you might say this becomes effective on May 1st as opposed to 3 days from now.
I'm Keith Buell. I'm 10 Fieldcrest Drive. I've come to a lot of meetings. Like, I think the important thing that we have to think about now is this was pretty much dead in the water when it came back just as one question. This was pretty dead in the water when it came back as one question. I mean, anybody who follows this town understands that the no vote, people are going to come out to the ballot box to vote against things. People aren't going to come out to the ballot box to vote for things. I mean, it's just our history. So I think what we have to do is, first we have to thank all the people that put the time in to do this, the 27 meetings. I went to a lot of the original meetings for the charter, and there wasn't a lot of attendance. This is a huge attendance, and it's good to see. But I think what we have to do is we have to learn from what has happened here. My focus is always what's best for the town. I was no on a few of them, and I was yes on a few of them, and when I go to the ballot box, I'm going to have to figure out what's the strongest feeling I have for what it is, and then cast either a yes or a no. I'm strongly for stipends. Our town has had 2 contested races in 6 years. We have 2 councilmen sitting on the council that were write-in votes that got voted in by 40 people. We have to do things to encourage people. We have a lot. I'm on the Citizens Advisory Board, and we have added so many talented people to the committees this year. It's just amazing. There's still a lot of openings, don't get me wrong. But the people that have stepped up, to join committees, the talent has been unbelievable. And I think our town's going to be well served over the next 3 years as these people take over. It's just been amazing. I'm excited. But to sit behind these desks is just a different animal. And we're just not getting people to come out, and we have to figure out what we can do to get the talented people to lead our town like these talented people have. I completely understand Mr. Atkins, his thought process on the term limits. It's absolutely the truth what you said, but I'm thinking what's best for our town, and I've seen a gentleman like Mr. Fitzgibbons, year after year after year, do exactly what's best for this town and vote exactly what's best for this town. And if he would want to run, I would never, ever not want him to run. Because somebody may not run on that, and we'll have a write-in vote, and then, we could really have someone running our town on 10 votes. Not that person wouldn't be good, but the bottom line is, we're talking about a democracy. We're talking about being elected, the voice of the people. 10 votes or 40 votes in a precinct is not the voice of the people, So I think what we have to do is we have to learn from this process, and I think we definitely have to realize that we're going to have to do this, vote by vote, individually the next time, so that we get some progress, because it is important that we take this charter and we make it better every time we do this, I understand the money problems completely. I'm telling you, I've invested time over the last years and years. I ran for the first council, and I didn't win, but I saw the process. And I figured out what the job is. It's not easy. School committee's not easy. Committees aren't easy. No, it's not easy stepping up and giving up your personal time. But I really think that the focus is going to have to be on what do we do the next time we bring this charter up for a vote. What do we do better so that we make progress, and so that people's voices are heard for the individual parts of it. And how do you decide? I don't know how you decide. I guess, hopefully people will have input and actually go to the meetings. But I do know that the 3 hot topics we've discussed tonight and we've debated tonight were going to be the ones that were going to be hot. And I think it's because of those 3 hot topics that this isn't going to pass. It's just my opinion, but I really think it's dead in the water. And that's unfortunate because the time and effort that was put in will be seen for naught. That's why it's important that we continue to thank the people that put the time in. And hopefully the next time, hopefully they start right away after the vote. They start again working on it, and we make some progress the next time. It's too late to point figures. It's too late to yell. We got to be productive, and that's the important thing. So I think it's great that we all came out. I think it's great that there was a little bit of debate, a little heat, not as much heat as I've seen before, but we're all here for the same reason. Even if we're against opposite sides, I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't want Bridgewater to be the best town that it can be, no matter what side of questions you're on, So we have to go from there, but if you ask me, we got to do whatever we can do to make people want to come and lead our town. And I am sure, like Dennis said, the selectmen had stipends, and they voted themselves to get rid of the stipends because of what was going on with the town. I'm sure if the town, gets into that place where it was, that the first thing this council would do would take away their stipends. They'd do it. I know. I have complete confidence that they would do it. So I don't worry about that concern. My concern is on the other end, getting people to go to the ballot. The only way the issues get out here is if we have races. That's it. You never hear the issues, ever, because there's never any races. You never hear it until the very end. And by that, usually it's too late. And I know Mr. Atkins dying to refute some what I said, so I'll let him talk.
Well, I'm hoping that some other people that haven't had a chance to ask questions can ask questions. Okay.
Hi, I'm Fred Chase, and I live at 60 Old Farm Road. I am the district counselor for District 4. And about 2 weeks ago at our council session, we first considered the matter of moving forward this proposed charter amendment to the ballot in April. And you might remember that I raised objection at that time based on many of the comments that we've already heard that I don't need to repeat. Certainly the point that Dennis first mentioned tonight, the fact that this was returned to us from the Commonwealth in a form that I think no one reasonably anticipated. That certainly is very high on my list. When we think about some of the changes, some of the more significant changes that would be effectuated by the charter amendment, talking about the appointment of the town clerk, for example, well, I'm not of the opinion that we should be removing the power to vote for any office from the voters. With respect to term limits, I am not in favor of term limits, frankly, personally. But I think that the voters would need ample opportunity to consider this without it being bundled into a collection of other provisions, many of which are valid, perfectly good. In fact, I think the other evening, I certainly attempted to give credit to the committees who had worked on this for quite a lengthy period of time. I just feel that a straight up or down vote is not appropriate. We are, as you've indicated yourself, Mr. Wood, we are the elected representatives. We are being subverted by moving forward to the ballot without us as a council having the opportunity to consider the measures that have been recommended to us by the committees, notwithstanding all the meetings that took place in the past. We need to consider them individually. We were denied that opportunity. And if you remember the vote, the final vote to move this to the ballot in April was 6-3. Together with me, 2 other councilors also voted to not move it forward. And 2 additional councilors expressed serious reservations about it, largely with respect to the manner in which it was returned to us from the Commonwealth. But nonetheless, they, on consideration, thought it should go to the voters to be considered. But my point being, there is far from sweeping approval on the council level for the charter amendment as it now stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken yet that wants to say something? Okay. I have an answer for Mr. Dolan's question. It does just say 72 hours. And while I'm not a lawyer, I play one on TV. And I think that the legal advice, if we were to ask, would say, if we put a determined date for it to take effect, that the legal establishment would be fine with it. Anyone else? Aisha?
Well, this is Bill Akins again, Oak Meadow Drive, Oak Meadow Place, sorry. I heard what you were saying, and you're right, I wanted to rebut. I took papers out, and the reason why I did was because I was asked to. My second day here, I'm new to town. I came in 2017. Day after Labor Day, they had an ad hoc marijuana committee. One of the things I did when I came here is I looked to see how Bridgewater voted on marijuana. So it was important to me because I brought my daughter here to raise her in a family-friendly town. I disagree greatly with Mr. Wood on that subject. I don't like the idea of an easy, quick fix of getting money from selling drugs. That's how I look at it. He may disagree with me on it, but that's the reason why I decided to run. Now, I was asked to take out papers because there was an opening. I took out the papers, I got the nominations, I got on the ballot. I then found out that Matt Rushton was also on the ballot. And I saw that he was a police officer for 20 years. And my thought was, well, I could run now against Matt and possibly beat him or lose to him, what doesn't matter. But both of us were on the same, I would imagine that we were on the same page when it came to the marijuana issue, which was important to me. I spoke to Matt, and he assured me that he was on the same page with me when it comes to the marijuana issue. We don't want it in town. So I sat back and I'm like, okay, when do I want to run? Do I want to run for the at-large position? Or would I rather go against somebody who's strongly for the marijuana shops? I'm in District 6. I plan on running against Mr. Wood. I'm going to put that right out there. Okay, because he is strong on marijuana, and I am dead set against it. There's better ways of raising money for the town. So what we need people to be able to come up and have that type of desire. I don't think a stipend had anything to do with my decision to make it. It was something that I felt strongly about. And the reason why I backed off, the reason why I withdrew my nomination is because I believed that me and Matt were on the same page. That is also another reason why you were talking about a scenario that could happen. Let's take the scenario, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm saying, but this is something we have to protect against in case it does happen. The reason why this is the charter, I know you did a lot of work on. It's something that needs more work, and it's going to be reviewed again in 2020, you said. Well, maybe it should be reviewed again in 2020 and not even voted on now because it has flaws. One of the scenarios, what happens if, for example, I'm thinking of running for District 6, and somebody who has been there for 20 years, with 6 other people who have been there for 20 years. They go into that clerk's office, just like Mary Lee said, and said, hey, I don't want you to validate those signatures that he got so that he can't run against me. That could happen. I'm not saying it will, but it protects against it when you have an elected clerk.
Mr. Gillis, you want to answer that question?
I think he's back in the.
I know he's in the back. He's on the board of voter registration now, so he can answer if that can happen or not.
Sorry, what? He's got called under for what?
The scenario is that someone tells the appointed town clerk that she or he should not accept the signatures of a particular person because they shouldn't run. What would the scenario play out in that, since you're on the board of voter registration?
We would be pushing to have those signatures certified, that just because somebody may say not to, I have a statutory responsibility as being on the board of registrars, just like the appointed or elected town clerk would have a statutory responsibility to follow the letter of the law. That we use, as the board of registers, we use the staff of the town clerk's office to help go through. Back 25 years ago, the registrars would actually be the ones going in and authorizing or verifying signatures. Now there are paid individuals that do that, but I have a statutory responsibility as being one of the 3 members of the board, or 4 members, of the board of registrars, just like the town clerk. So I don't think that situation could happen, that you can't tell me what to do because I'm an appointed position through, a legal process.
But we're talking, what I'm talking about is not honesty, okay? I'm not talking, I wouldn't suggest anything from anybody in the council right now. Anybody, this is a scenario that could happen that we need to protect against.
That could happen anyway.
It could happen.
Somebody.
But what I'm saying, when the clerk is accountable to the town council and not accountable to the electorate, then they can put undue pressure on that town clerk to do things that are not legal, not ethical. It opens things up to corruption. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm saying it opens it up, and we need to protect against that. And one thing that I found out that was really disturbing is that you can cut her salary. That is ridiculous. That should not be the case, because then you could put undue pressure on a clerk. That right there should be ripped out. What should happen is this should go back, not even be voted on, and reviewed in 2020 so that they can make it so that you can have individual questions on it and fix some of the flaws that are in it, because you did a lot of work on it, but it needs some more.
Okay, thank you. What I wanted to say was thank you everyone for coming tonight. I know this is one of many meetings. As someone who was on the Charter Review Committee, and it was so good to see Eric. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, so it was good for you to come out, and I appreciate that. Where we are today and where we are in April, nothing's going to change. The charter is on the ballot, and you have a choice to pick yes or no. As someone who was part of the process, did a lot of the research, was on the Charter Review Committee, and the chair of the Rules and Procedures Committee since I've been on the council for the past 5 years, I've seen both sides of it. And as someone who has seen the research, I am for an appointed town clerk. The reasons are we've had 2 elected town clerks in I think 37 years. So we're not using a lot of data or research of where we've had a lot of contested races for a town clerk and then have the repercussions of recalling someone beyond what happened. I know what happened beyond that kind of recall situation. And what we need for the town and what I think is best for the town is the ability to search for the right person to do the right role, to do the role correctly. I use my husband as an example probably far too often, that I would never want him to be the town clerk because he can't find the milk in the fridge. I don't think he'd be able to run an election, but he has the opportunity to run and to win. And I want to ensure that someone who's going to be running a lot of the most very important things of the town, which is for the vote of the people and the voice of the people to be run efficiently and smoothly and to get birth certificates and death certificates and all those things that happen that need to be accurate. I want someone who has the skills to do it, not just someone who was elected to do it. So that was my logic and reasoning for going through the process, and that's why I was for the appointed position, because much of you, I'm sure, work in various sectors. You wouldn't want someone who had no skills on your team. I want to ensure that the town always has the right skills in the seats. So that was for my, some of my reasonings for that. But again, I want to thank you all for the 90 minutes that you've put into this. I think I see a hand. Do we want to speak? Oh. But thank you again. And then Carlton, sure.
I don't know if you meant to say what you said the way you said it, but I took offense to what you said. It sounded like the way you said it sounded like you were almost saying Marilee wasn't doing her job the right way. Like she didn't have the tools to do her job. That's the way I heard it. Like you wanted an effective town clerk. She wasn't effective enough or didn't have the tools to do her job. And I might be wrong, but that's the way it sounded. And as a counselor, I don't think it's right to degrade our town clerk. So I just wanted to say that up front, whether that was what your intent was or not, whether that's the way you want us to vote or not. And as far as these, I do have some questions, just a few. One, I understand we have to vote all 5, and it's probably, like Keith said, it's going to fall dead. And I'm sorry that that's the way it's going to be. But as far as, I don't want to line item any one thing. My question is, when the review committee comes back, one, I want to be on it, if that's possible. 2, is there anywhere in this verbiage that says nobody can be on it that was on it before, to make sure it's done differently or better? To check and balance
I believe
the
that
people
it's
that
a
were on
committee
it.
that's appointed by the council,
Right, it's a volunteer.
Maybe there's too much power in the
the
council.
president of the council.
Say that again? The council seems to have a problem. No offense to anybody in this room, but you want to have all the power, and there doesn't seem to be any checks and balances on the town council. You're taking away the power of the people, piece by piece by piece by piece. You want to appoint everybody in town, and we've lost our ability to elect our officials. And I think that's a problem. We need to be able to elect our officials. I'm afraid to say I can't recognize my own district counselor, so I don't know if he's in the room, but I wish he was. And if he is, please identify yourself. District 3? District 3? No. No. I'd like to know him. I'd like to see him. I'd like for there be more representation for the people that represent me. And I'd like to see the people that represent me actually represent my thoughts, my wants, my needs. And I'd like to be able, my government run for me. I appreciate that you represent the majority. Actually, I wouldn't know almost anything that goes on in this town if it wasn't for Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood puts it out on public media so that we can actually see what's happening. I don't have cable. I know that most people do, but I cut the cable. I won't pay Comcast. So I don't see these broadcasts any longer. I have to go to Mr. Fowler to watch his BTV every now and again. But the only way we can access things is if we elect them. And if we take away all of our elections, we're not going to have any power or any say in our government. And you guys have put us in front of a charter that you guys don't even agree on. You're taking away our power. Stop it. That's all I have to say.
So one really important thing that I forgot to say at the beginning was a huge thank you. I know Aisha said it, but I'd really like to say a huge thank you to both charter committees, the one before and the Charter Review Committee, to the council for the work that they do and all the work that they do on their individual committees. I think you're all very committed, and I appreciate it. I see it up front, what kind of work you put in. I think it is difficult in this town. You said, forming, storming, maybe forming came after storming.
Forming, storming, norming, performing.
Yeah. I'm not sure we got to norming yet, Bill. I think we're still a little stormy and trying to figure all of this out. This town is a very difficult town to communicate with. I will say that. Lauds to BTV and what they do, and the fact that they take the broadcasts. Not only is this going out live tonight, but there will be a link and it'll be put out on Facebook, and people can watch it on the train commuting back and forth from Boston, at home, at their mother's house, wherever they are and whatever they're doing. And that's really wonderful, but it is a hard town to communicate with, and that makes our elections hard. I can't agree with Keith more. about the fact that we need competition in elections. And even Mr. Aiken, I told him, I was sad when he withdrew because I like a competitive election. If you don't have a debate that can be put on BTV and you don't hear, we're not a one-issue town. We're not a town just based on marijuana or not. There are many, many, many things that create this town and make it what it is. Our sign laws, our what businesses come in, what our zoning bylaws or ordinances are for the town. These are important things. People serving on all these committees to make us what we are. So a big thanks to everybody for doing all of that. Keep on doing what you're doing. Aisha, I took no offense. So I'm sorry. Robin did, but I know Aisha, and she and I are okay. So just to say that.
Can I say publicly, I told Marilee when we got together, I consider her and Carlton friends. I don't know if they do me, but I deeply respect both of them for their service to the town. I think one of the confusing things is Marilee is the perfect role model for the town clerk. She comes in early, stays late, works with everyone through issues. She helps people with, you mentioned school, residency, that sort of thing. It's very difficult to see what's wrong with that model. So she does an awesome job. And no one on the council or the town manager's office has to tell her how to do the job because she does things like she took her staff out for training. She took training. She's in the Association of Town Clerks, et cetera, et cetera. So some of these things, as we go through these heated discussions, if that's what happens, I have trouble because I really like Marilee. I like how she does the job. I like the office. I like how it's run independently and no one has to really worry about it. It does all the right stuff at the right time. So that makes it a little difficult. But I do like the person in the seat. I try to separate the role from the person and think 10 years out for all these issues. Thanks.
Bill, Joe Gillis, I came out from behind, the guy in the booth. A couple of clarifying questions or whatever. If I understand this correctly, a vote up, some of these things will happen instantaneously or fairly instantaneously. The language changes or whatever that process is, for filing language changes. The change to the town clerk would be a 2022 change. The change to stipends, I think, is 2023. Oh, 2021. Okay.
Right.
The stipend is at 2022, I think.
Not for 3 years after passage, right?
Now, that's if this article passes. If it does not pass, are there any statutory limits on how it could be resubmitted? I know sometimes there's rules that once you submit something, you can't resubmit something again for a period of time.
So that's a good question. I would redirect it to the attorney because back when we were looking at town, and again, we're a strong town manager, town council form of government, there's certain ways to affect changes to the charter. And by us selecting a charter review committee and then having the state approve the changes and then having it come back for the town-wide vote is the way to do it. I think we're already at the end of that journey. So if it fails, nothing changes. Nothing changes for the better of all the pieces that people talked about. Nothing changes at all from our current charter. You would have to restart the cycle. You would have to go from the very beginning and say you're going to appoint a charter review committee, and that's based on volunteers, and they would go through the same process that has been gone through for the past 5 years. The 5 years' work would be basically thrown away, although we have maybe templates, and it would have to start all over again.
Bill, I have two questions. It's slightly different, and I don't want to belabor it too long, but I think it's really important that one of the major discussions that the Charter Review Committee had was on the, you know what, I'd look at it and then I lose it. It's the FinCom, the Finance Committee. We had gone through a lot with the town manager, and we had redefined the whole process totally. That is as part of the charter. But the way it's written now, it's basically, it will be set by ordinance, and so all of those details are lost. and not in this particular charter. What we had recommended, I'm going to ask you, my question is going to be is what happened and why and what's the implication. But we had set it to reduce it to 5 members, 3 appointed by the town council, 2 appointed by the town manager. Scope to focus on advice and recommendations on the annual operating budget, long-range financial planning, financial modeling, and capital improvement plan. So what we were trying to do was move that committee away from having to approve a $25,000 gift to the town, or a $50,000 this, or the budget. They may still have to do the budget thing, but why did that detail get taken out of the current, and be not put in the current revision?
Honestly, I don't remember, so maybe one of the other colleagues on Rules and Procedures can answer that for me. I don't know if we saw that level of detail. I know that the original 9 with 333 was a conspiracy thing, so that you couldn't overweight the FinCom by town council versus town manager versus town. That really was a check and balance. I don't think that's worked well because we have trouble finding volunteers for that committee. But I don't remember the exact discussion, how we resolved it down to the language. Maybe Aisha does.
What I recall with that specifically and why we moved it to ordinance was to have a little bit more flexibility. If something were to change, we would have more flexibility to change an ordinance in that time frame as opposed to our 5-year cycle of the charter. And all those things are very important and helpful, but we wanted to have more flex that way, so that's why we rewrote it to kind of have that catch-all of the ordinance, is what I recall from conversations over the years. Is that helpful?
You mentioned something very important that I've glossed over because we're speaking just about the charter. The charter acts as our constitution, but the administrative code, which was not written at the time that we formed, and we went through a storming episode. We finally got the administrative code done 2 years ago, a while ago. It was a lot of work to do that. So that complements the charter. It's as critical, if not more important than the charter itself, because it also brings in all the code of ordinances, which used to be the old bylaws. So it creates the language around dog licenses. It creates the language around nuisances. Creates the language around other aspects of everyone's day-to-day life, in addition to how is the town organized. And there's language in both the old charter and the new charter about how you reorganize that. So one of the reorganizations we did in that process was we took the highway department, the water department, and the sewer department, which are 3 separate entities, and we joined them under a common umbrella, which is the DPW. Budget discussions are next week, not tonight. And we thought about Parks and Recreation as a new department. It was the Recreation Department, and you had the golf course, and you had a couple other things. And when we talked about park stewards the other night, it's all collapsed now under Parks and Rec. Again, budget discussion is next week, not tonight. And so there was a lot of reworking of how a town that had been small and is getting larger might economize on the different departments and make it a little more efficient. So the admin code, which we're talking about here, about the FinCom, is where we would probably want to put all that language, whatever the final language is.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a comment, but another question. We recommended that you remove the limitation on holding elected office and serving on other boards and committees. The way it stands currently is you cannot be elected and serve on a volunteer board, i.e., when I was a library trustee, elected library trustee, when the new charter came in play, I was also on 2 committees, or 1 committee. I had to choose between staying on the committee or resigning as an elected official. I chose to go to the committees. Has that been changed, or is that restriction still in place?
I don't remember. I can search for it.
I didn't see what you had done. That's why I'm asking, because you guys are the closest to what's going on. It's still in play? It's just another piece that this tape should go to the future, whatever it is, Charter Committee reviews, because this is going to be very critical to the acceptance. And I think we have the basis of a sound charter, much better than it was before. That's no sparing the other people that did the work. They did heavy work. We did heavy work. The FinCom thing I mentioned is one of those. So going forward, it's a lot more work. I very much like the fact that we have the definitions. I was frustrated that there were no definitions, so I didn't even understand what the charter was saying until we got definitions. Last point. March 23rd, I'm marketing now. March 23rd at the Senior Center, we are having our first public meeting from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on the update and the comprehensive master plan update. It is a public meeting. It will be a short lecture period, and then there will be a lot of table work where we're getting input from people. So please, everyone, come out on the 23rd to the Senior Center. It's part of our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie Scleparis again. I just wanted to address something that Keith said earlier, and I want to acknowledge the fact that Alicia is my district councilwoman, and she was a write-in, and I appreciate the fact that she did step up. She thinks she's doing a great job. I also was a write-in for school committee the first time I ran, but I did have another write-in competitor, and I ran again unopposed the second time. This year, I did pull papers, right, with the encouragement of my constituents and some of my fellow school committee members, but as a liaison to the Finance Committee, and knowing that the Town Finance Committee meetings were canceled, and knowing that there was another strong candidate that was willing to step up to the plate, young blood, young students in the district, I did not turn in my papers that were ready to go in hopes that I could potentially, I was going to look further into the Finance Committee so that maybe the town and the school committee could both be covered. So that is my reason, even though the enterprise I didn't contact them and they didn't contact me, but it's not that I didn't want to continue to give back to the community. It's just that other people were willing to step up, whether it be unopposed or opposed. Thank you.
Did you say you wanted a spot on FinCom?
I'm trying to work through it. If you're willing to give me one,
So
I'm willing to talk about it.
Let me pitch for anyone
One
who
or
wants
9 or 1 or 5 or 1 or 6. I have an accounting degree. If
Doesn't
that
matter.
matters.
It doesn't matter. Besides the council, the FinCom is probably the second.
Meetings, I have a pretty good track record, I have to say.
FinCom is probably the most strategically important committee of the town, besides the town council. They should be coming up with strategy, recommending policy, and doing other things, and that's sometimes a struggle too. So if there's an opening, certainly we'll consider all. Yeah. Anyone else? There's volunteer opportunities all over the place. It's on bridgewaterma.org. Take a look. Any other questions? Any other comments? All right, so again, I wanted to do this, and I did advertise it on Facebook heavily, trying to get everyone out. I'm whatever your opinion is, it is. If it passes and people want to talk about turning it back into elected next time, that's something the CRC can do next time. If it doesn't pass and the CRC next time wants to do something else, then that's it. I think, in my opinion, overall, there's benefit to having it passed now. I hope that's the way the voters go. But again, voting is your own choice. And, the limits, having the limits on there takes away your choice, but keeps the choice. The other way around, changes the choice. That is my opinion only. Speaking about Sean, I think he's going to try to have another information session. I will make the correction to the presentation about the limits, and then I can share the slides with him. If he wants to use them, he can. If he's making up something else, he can. Any other questions before we close out the evening? I think that's it. So we didn't officially open it because I was quorum of 1, we're a quorum of 2. That was all the business that we posted for, so we'll adjourn the meeting. Yes. Adjourned at 8:48. Thank you.